All right.
Is light flashing or no?
I think the light's okay. I'm unmuted, just FYI. I think the light's okay. I'm unmuted, just FYI. Okay. Hello, everyone. Let's see. Hello, everyone. I'm so glad we actually made it on. I'm on call right now, so we have tried to do this probably 3 or 4 times. And finally we decided, even though it's late, because I just got called into the hospital, that we would go ahead and just see who showed up. So today I'm with one of my colleagues, Dominique Robinson. Do you want to introduce yourself, Dominique?
Hi everyone, my name is Dominique Roberson, and thank you, Ms. Connor, for introducing me. I come to this work both as an educator and as someone deeply invested in the future.
1 second. I don't think, let me make sure that you are on the right link, because I'm not seeing you in the right. Let's see. Da, 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 da. Gonna send you a new one. Okay. Because do you see me in the meeting room?
No.
Yeah. I just sent it to you via text. Do you want me to email it to you? Okay. Or do you want me to just add you like under with your DA email?
Yeah, you can do it.
Okay. All right, let's do this to you, Bob. Hmm. Okay. Email sent. All right. You want to send it to Yanni? I always like actually have to confirm that I never like trust that I'm actually on without someone verifying for me. That's the thing I hate. It's like you can't really see. There's no visibility from like the platforms. For everyone watching us, we're here, we're live. Great. All right, we'll try that one more time.
All right.
All right, so Dominique, go ahead and introduce yourself and then we'll jump right in.
All right. Well, hi everyone. My name is Dominique Roberson.
Do you want to just take yourself off of audio?
There we go.
Yeah.
All right. Hi everyone. I'm Dominique Roberson, and I come into this work both as an educator and as someone who is deeply invested in the future of children and families. For me, this work matters because it exposes the silence we both often accept around race, around inequality, and around systems that fail to protect the most vulnerable. I believe by naming these truths, we not only honor those people who have been overlooked, but also create a safe space for real change. So I'm honored to be here today, Ms. Yamicia.
And we are very excited to have you. So Dominique and I are actually in the same room. I've never done this with someone in the same space, which is exciting. We're still working out the technical difficulties, but we're getting better. I think we're only 10 minutes late this time. No matter how early we start, I feel like there's always like a bunch of things at the end that just don't work. But we made it. So for those who don't know me, my name is Dr. Yamicia Connor, and this is a event in the Labora Collective. There's a lot going on in this country, as everyone is aware. And we're going to dive into some of those topics and connect how they affect women and children, which is our focus. But first, I want to take a moment to explain who we are, why we exist, and why your support matters. So, what is the Labora Collective? What they don't tell you in medical school is that only 10% of health outcomes actually comes from medical care. The other 90% comes from your zip code, your housing, work, the policies that govern your life, the environmental regulations that decide if you breathe clean air or drink clean water. But our medical system and our whole healthcare infrastructure pretends that bodies exist in isolation from the world around them. We expect perfect compliance. We expect patients to be able to drop everything on a dime and make an appointment in the middle of the day, no matter how many jobs they're working, how many kids they have at home. And that's just, it's, it's why it's one of the many reasons why our healthcare system is broken. And so the Labora Collective is different. Here, we are the unified content framework for Diosara. So that's a women's health startup that addresses the full 100% of what determines health outcomes. We combine direct medical care with analysis of the systems that actually make you sick or keep you well. There are three pillars to the Labora Collective. The first is women's health. Many of you are a part of the women's health community. This is where we bring medical expertise contextualized with social determinants. So we don't just talk about PCOS without examining food policy. We don't analyze maternal mortality without addressing housing and workplace protections. We want to think about the big picture. In her name, that's where our policy analysis lives. We talk about things like immigration enforcement and the impacts on prenatal care, housing regulations, examined through pregnancy outcomes, that 90% that actually determines whether you live or die. And then the final part is the blueprint. That's our healthcare innovation area. So that's where we talk about how we're building Diosara for the populations we care for, but also speak more broadly about how we innovate in such a broken healthcare system, especially during this time when people of color, women are really under attack. Even just having that framing that you want to care for those communities is now seen as like pretty controversial, and divisive. And so, but we are here to kind of stand in opposition to all of that. So why subscribe? I want to just explain a little bit about where your money goes. Again, traditional healthcare focuses on the 10%. We want to address the full 100%. We focus in Black maternal health, and that's not an area where traditional funders invest money. They don't really care. So VCs aren't going to fund solutions for Black women, Hispanic women, Native American women. Government grants have just, disappeared, have blown in the political winds. And healthcare investors are more interested in profit than actually solving problems. And so we are completely self-funded. Um, every dollar that you give as a subscription goes not to just creating this content, but to paying the staff who's building the real medical infrastructure that is what we hope will be there in the future, in the very near future, when a lot of the current system really collapses from underneath us. That's going to be something we'll talk about a little bit later. We are building programs like Dios's Shield that provide emergency care when hospitals fail. We are publishing high quality content that helps educate the broader community as well as our patients. The medical infrastructure sits within a community. That's one of the things that makes us unique. And so this is as important as all the other aspects of our clinical care. And that's why we take it very seriously. That's why it's 11:30 at night and I'm still here. is because we think it's important, and we want to take opportunities to connect with you all, even if it's just two people. Um, there are three membership tiers. Diosa Circle, that's the free tier that gives you access to a significant amount of the content. Diosa Insiders, that is the $10 a month subscription, which gives you access to all three pillars. And so we're not separating them out. There's no separate subscription fee. Once you subscribe to one, um, you get automatic subscription to all three of them, unless you elect not to. And then the last are Labora luminaries. So those are people who are really interested in investing in our infrastructure, and they want kind of to sit on our board, essentially our community board, and have direct impact, and be able to help shape how we are building our infrastructure. And we have several of those in our communities, which we're really grateful for. So let's dive right in. So just to, be very transparent, this is a really sad time in our nation's history. I was reflecting earlier today, when I was preparing for this, and thinking about 2008 when I was watching Obama's inauguration. This was my first year of medical school. I think I was like studying for some quiz the next day. And I remember just standing there. It was, in the evening. Um, and my now husband, had the inauguration on the screen. And I just remember, the moment when they announced, um, that he won the election, and feeling like genuinely it was a remarkable feeling, that and it was a remarkable accomplishment that a country that was built on slavery could elect a black president. Um, that was something to truly be proud of. But not even 20 years later, we're at the complete opposite end of the spectrum. Um, but one thing I've learned as a physician is you can't treat symptoms without ignoring root causes. And that is really the diagnosis for what ails our nation is we thought we were going to get by without dealing with the root cause of the deeply embedded racism in our nation's infrastructure, and that we could just jump right into a post-racial society, and we could all be happy, and live our wonderful lives. And that is not how life really works. And so I think more than anything, it really underlies why we have to, just like in medicine, you can't, treat symptoms. You have to address root causes. Um, you have to think about the system that created the disease. You can make the same analogy for our democracy. We we weren't able to achieve this magical post-racial society because we haven't done the really hard work of of really changing hearts and minds, and convincing a majority of our country that that a pluralistic democracy is really is our agreed upon future. And in 2008, when I was, just graduated from college, starting medical school, I didn't realize that that was really, something that was genuinely debated. Genuinely, people had, disagreements about, the meaning of the Declaration of Independence, the phrasing of all men were created equal. Now I understand that all too well, and realize that many of the things that I thought were settled questions in terms of how society functions, what makes someone good, what it means to be virtuous, that those things weren't settled at all. And it leaves us here today, really trying to understand how we got here, and more importantly, how we can get out of this conundrum. And so I'm going to turn it over to Dominique. We have some like questions prepared, but I want to keep this, open. We'll find some way to actually check the chat in case people have comments and questions. Um, so I will work on pulling that up. But Dominique, do you have some thoughts? And then we can kind of move towards what we prepared.
Yeah. So Dr. Connor, can you tell me why is this moment particularly critical? Like right now, this moment.
I mean, um, the future is changing rapidly every single day. It's almost overwhelming because outside it's still, people still go to work. It looks more or less the same. But the infrastructure that makes our society function is being quickly dismantled. And it's honestly not clear where we're going to be in 12 months. And that wasn't something true before. People were very, the world's economy was based on the fact that in 12 months, if there was if the earth was still going around the sun, that the US would still be more or less functioning the same, right? The same fundamental principles, the same fundamental rule of law, the same fundamental dedication to democracy. And people around the world trusted that reality. And now that reality is completely up in the air. Maybe we'll have vaccines, maybe not. Maybe we'll have laws, maybe not. Maybe we'll have free speech, maybe next year I'll be in jail. Who knows? And these are like real questions that people have, and you can only laugh, right? Otherwise, you would just find yourself crying all the time. But um, it's almost unbelievable. Like if this was, I do fiction writing, and if I like as like a fiction writer, you're always testing your like I call them hypotheses. They're not they're like plots, right? The like the scientist in me can't come out. Um I'm testing my, the plots that I have with like what feels logical. Like does this feel like this would really happen in real life? And what's happening right now, like no one would ever think that. Like, this would feel like far-fetched. It wouldn't feel reasonable, but here we are. Here I'm gonna,
Okay.
that's okay. I'm just gonna my husband asked me to text him when we started, so
Mm.
I'll use that opportunity to text him. Um, do you need to, did you lose it? Okay, you good? Okay, all right, let's go.
So right now, we're at an inflection point, and we can either keep treating symptoms while ignoring causes, or wait for broken institutions to save us. What are your points on that?
I think we're not going to have a choice, very soon. I think the choice is very quickly being made for us. And I think that what's in front of us is how we want our legacies to be written. Um, I think anyone that has anything that can be taken away easily. So, like for me, I have like a medical license that is dependent on the state. Will they decide like to pull my license? Who knows, right? Because I can't practice medicine without that. So any way that you're connected to the state, that's at risk, especially if you are um, vocal against what's happening. But the way I think about it is there's 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 no safety in silence. There might be this facade of safety, but you're not going to hide from this, right? And so for me, it's easy. Like I'm a Black woman, like they're going to notice that I don't belong, right? There's no blending in here. And so I either can choose to cower and be afraid, or I can try to fight for my children's future. And I very honestly don't know. I don't have any assurances that things are going to be fine. They very well might not be. But this is the only thing that lets me sleep at night, knowing that you know, whatever happens, I can say I tried to do my part, and the rest is like in God's hands. Um, and that's kind of the perspective I take as a physician, right? Like you can only I'm I'm a mortal person, right? I'm dedicated to my patients. I put an extraordinary amount of effort to caring for them. But my abilities, I'm limited, right? I can't work miracles. I'm limited by the infrastructure that I have at my disposal. And sometimes you just have to understand where, like, you just you cannot single-handedly always fix things. Um, and so that's what keeps me going is I try not to think about all the things I can't change, just focus every day on the small things I can and um, use that to keep my momentum moving forward. And then I also have like a beautiful family. I have three beautiful children, and just like seeing them, seeing their innocence, it just reminds you that life is actually a lot more beautiful than sometimes um, we as adults forget. When you watch your children like just be like fascinated where we're traveling and so we're like staying in a hotel and everything is just amazing to them. Like being in a new space, just like looking around, looking at the ceiling, looking at the lights, like checking out the closet, things that are so benign and so banal to us, like are remarkable, right? And so it helps you just take a step back sometimes and think about that life is actually really beautiful and people have done much harder things than what we're doing today, right? We're living in a relative privilege still, even though that it feels like things are falling apart. They really aren't. We're still quite privileged. We're still quite safe. And the big tragedy is like we're going to be known as like the society that took the most prosperous civilization and literally within the span of a year like destroyed it for what for seemingly nothing. It's not even clear that the people we're following are like all the way mentally competent. So
Yeah. So that brings me to today's focus. Can you speak on your points, specifically focusing on today's events and policies and things that are going on?
well, I'll take a step back. We first decided to do this live. I mean, it's not going to be a secret to everyone here that 10 days ago, Charlie Kirk was assassinated. Um, it's been a overwhelming national response, complete media saturation. There are people who are having employment consequences if you didn't grieve appropriately, government investigations. And all of this really reveals a couple fundamental truths about our society that I think it's important that we acknowledge and we speak to, even though people, may say that we're not, appropriately grief stricken. But I think it's important that we understand how to contextualize this moment, not because we're heartless or we lack empathy, but because we live in the real world and we understand that empathy are not just for people who are famous or who have a large voice or who are white men, and we have to have empathy for all people. And our job is to speak for those who don't have the ability to speak for themselves. And so today we're going to examine a couple of things. So the first is going to be on violence against women. That is going to be our focus in October. We have a very I'm very proud of the series we put together. It was really heartbreaking to really see what women are facing in this country. I learned a lot. Like there were things that I did not know, and this as someone who does this work. Um, so today we're going to be talking a little bit about pregnancy homicides, the the epidemic of killing Native women. Um, we'll speak a little bit about our healthcare system, how it's collapsing in real time, specifically in the birth world. We'll touch a little bit about how Diosada's model is providing real-time intervention when these systems will ultimately fail. And then we'll end with just a peek into the economy and how what's happening now is contributing to deepening generational poverty, which is going to, continue these cycles over and over and again. And then lastly, we always want to leave people with what they can actually do to protect themselves and their community, including accessing direct, services, emergency contacts. We'll have all that information available um, to everyone after this live session. So we're not just talking about political commentary. Uh, we want to make sure that people understand that politics and policy those aren't words, right? Those are the laws that dictate how you and I live day to day. Who has resources and who doesn't? Who can speak and who can't? Whose murder gets investigated and whose gets ignored? And what I really want to emphasize is so many of the policies that are happening now are inflicting violence in real time and killing women. And I think we need to just say that very clearly so that there's no like business speak, no like beating around the bush. Like people are dying because of the policies that we have put in place. And no matter no matter how fast they try to run and disconnect themselves and believe that, their words are just words on a page, our job is to make sure that they are held accountable, right? Um, if we can't hold you accountable to the law, then we'll at least hold you accountable in front of society, right? And I think that's really, really important um, because we have to find some way of protecting ourselves and protecting the women around us.
Now, you mentioned building infrastructure versus just analyzing problems. How does that change the conversation?
Well, I mean, the original focus of Diosada was really around supporting women during obstetrical emergencies. Um, because, our organizational hypothesis was that if we help women during emergencies, that is at that point of intervention, we're going to have the maximum impact. Because it's not often the case that, for example, a woman comes in and you don't know that she has preeclampsia. it's that providers know she has preeclampsia, but somehow they send her home, or her water's broken and she doesn't get sent to the tertiary care facility. She just gets sent home, or she's, in the emergency room bleeding for, 30 hours and nobody is seeing her, right? That shouldn't happen. And what we are building is a way um, to help protect patients from having that happen to them. It can be as simple as, directly interacting with their clinical team to be like, hey, this is what standard of care is. It's very easy for providers to, um, belittle patients and minimize their concerns, but it's much different when they're talking to a colleague or a peer who knows exactly what right from wrong is, and knows the guidelines and the expectations just as well as they do. But even a step further from that, providing patients legal support, because sometimes some people are just, they're just unwilling um, to do what is right or ethical. And what you see now is doctors hiding behind their legal teams, not wanting to intervene on women's behalf. And so we need to have an infrastructure that is just as aggressive, right? And recognizes that if we're fighting things like systemic racism, those are power constructs, right? And you can't fight a power construct with, implicit bias training. You just can't. Um, you have to fight it with a power tool, right? And that's what we're building. And so when we look at maternal mortality rates, we're not just providing information, we're building the clinical model that prevents those deaths. When we discuss workplace barriers to healthcare access, we're designing virtual care models that work around those barriers. I want the women listening today to know they're not crazy for feeling unsafe. You're not overreacting. You're not alone in this fight. We're not just talking about these problems, but we're actively, day and night, building solutions to help solve them. And so in this moment, I find myself, yes, sad, but I'm also furious and determined. And most importantly, I'm here, not just analyzing this crisis, but building medical infrastructure to help us survive it. And with that, we can kind of dive into some of the more hot topics of the day, and then help the audience understand how what's happening in the external world, how it's impacting women all around them.
Yeah. So let's dive into what prompted today's specific focus.
So as we were describing earlier, 10 days ago, Charlie Kirk was assassinated at Utah Valley University. The response has been divisive, to say the least. He died in emergency surgery. On September 12th, Tyler James Robinson was arrested after his family contacted a family friend who was in law enforcement and arranged for him to turn himself in. Prosecutors are the death penalty, alleging that he was politically motivated. So the loss is real. We're not going to deny that. Kirk has children who will grow up without their father. He has a wife who is now a widow, and that devastation, it matters. But it's not the only thing that matters.
Mm-hmm. But you see problems with the response.
Yeah, absolutely. In those 10 days, what should have been just mourning for a dear friend or a respected colleague or someone that you admire became, the justification for a war against people they don't like. And when they say radical left, I just want to be very clear. They're talking about Jewish people, women, college educated women, and Black people. Like this is who they're talking about. um, they all know who they're talking about, and so it's not surprising why when you go on, when you like look out in, who's talking in the media or who's like writing on their blog posts, like why different people have different perspective. It's like, of course, like we have always been the people that they were targeting, and they were looking for any single excuse. And now, although like this is actually not one. He was a private citizen. He wasn't even in politics. Um, like would they be doing this if like I don't know some other celebrity was slain? I mean, as horrible as it is, the connections they're making just aren't legitimate in my opinion. But they needed a reason to unleash their barely contained rage. And this, is good as any. It seems to be the case. And so there have been employment consequences, healthcare workers, military personnel, teachers who have been fired over social media posts, the Department of Defense reviewing dozens of posts. I mean, oh gosh. In a country where people are like so scared of crime and the crime in our city, blah 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 blah. Um, the fact that you have law enforcement, large portions of our law enforcement right now on people's Facebook profiles identifying college kids that they want to then attack or media personalities that they've never liked. I mean, that I can't think of a worse use of resources. There have been doxing campaigns where right-wing groups have published information on of their critics. The media has completely saturated, the airwaves with this discussion, in primetime specials, wall-to-wall coverage. Meanwhile, another 450 Americans have died from gun violence in those same 10 days, about 45 per day. Those are kids, those are fathers, those are mothers, those are pregnant women. And it has barely gotten a peep. And so that's why I feel frustration around the response to this man's death, not because his life doesn't have value, all life has value, but so do those other 450 Americans who are now no longer with us. And for a lot of the policies that he was an advocate for, right? That can't be disconnected from the context of this situation. It just can't. That's just not how life works. Even though they want to rewrite history, rewrite all of the rules of society, and make you feel like you are this horrible person, because your empathy doesn't go towards a person who has spent a good part of their lives really degrading and minimizing a lot of the world around him. That they can do that, they can say that, but we don't have to buy into it, and we don't have to give it credibility. And that's one of the things that I am urging people. You can't get caught up in having to justify your existence or having to justify, your level of empathy, or saying that you're, feeling like you're not a good person because, you you don't feel sad about this individual's death. Like that is just a way that they have found to like spin us, help our help us spin our own selves in knots, right? So that we get so unfocused that we forget about those 450 Americans and we instead engage in um, virtue signaling about how we believe in free speech and he had such a great debate culture, yada, 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 which couldn't be any further from the truth.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
so I want to dive into some of these shocking realities. I know you were talking a lot about, you touched on earlier briefly about the homicide epidemic. Can you talk to me a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So what really keeps me up at night, as a physician who treats women is the fact that the number one cause of death in America for pregnant women is homicide. And that's not something that we knew for a long time because we just never collected the data. And when we think about what's going to happen in the future, we'll probably, for the foreseeable future, not know it again, right? Because they've just dismantled all of the infrastructure that would be required to gather that data. And so for 1 year, we can confidently say from 2000 to 2019, this was the number one leading cause of death for pregnant women. And I guarantee you, although we can't prove it because we don't have the data, that it's much higher now. Every we have every reason to suspect that. All of the trends are going to worsening. Violence against women in general is getting worse. And so there's no reason to think that the pregnancy is, homicide in pregnancy is not going to be an even greater risk for our, pregnant women. And so it's not high blood pressure, right? Because we've learned how to manage preeclampsia. It's not hemorrhage because we have protocols, we have very effective medicines. As we do drills as on L&D units about how you handle a postpartum hemorrhage. It's not an infection because we have ICUs and we have antibiotics. It's what happens in their homes where they're supposed to be safe. And so just to speak a little bit about numbers, 16% more, you're 16% more likely to be murdered if you're pregnant than a non-pregnant woman. And if you are a teen, I want you to hear this, you have a 7 times higher risk of being murdered as a pregnant teen. I never knew that. I've never heard anyone, explain that. And again, this is all the stuff that is going under the surface as we spin ourselves into knots about the death of one man, and we're missing the utter devastation and violence all around us.
Now, how long has this been happening without our knowledge?
I would imagine decades, probably. That's the beauty of not collecting data, is you don't have to be responsible. I mean, one thing that although many of the people in this administration are completely and utterly incompetent, there are some people who obviously know what they're doing, and they are going after infrastructure that's really important. And the ability to not collect this data, the ability to just have society exist in this shadow. Well, you know who thrives in those shadows? Abusers, fraudsters, criminals. They love the shadows, right? People who kill their girlfriends when they're pregnant. So we will never know. how long this has been the case. I would imagine for quite some time. And again, the bigger thing I want to emphasize is I can only guess that it's getting worse. And what makes it really tragic is that as a medical community, we completely failed to even identify this. We never classified homicide as maternal mortality, which is like you think, but you're killing pregnant women. Shouldn't that be a part? Yes, absolutely. But for so long, medicine has really just focused on, you come to see me and the in the clinic, and I'm responsible for like three things that only affect about 10% of your health outcomes. And as long as I do those three things, I'm good. And that is completely antithetical to the practice of medicine. But for a lot of reasons, for the same reasons that people don't want to acknowledge that systemic racism even exists, right? We just ignored all those other things, right? Because if you admit that there are factors outside of medicine that can impact someone's health, then like, what does that mean about your whole understanding of the world, about the fact that systemic issues aren't real, right? And so it's been convenient and chosen for a long time to really ignore it. We, made some strides over the last 2 decades, but we're part of the, I guess, woke radical left. And we just, our obsession with race and equity and understanding how the health of other people that are not white, aren't men, how they're, what affects their health outcomes was just so intolerable it's completely intolerable to people. Um, and then now, we probably, who knows how long it's going to be until we're back there. It's something I try not to think about because as a scientist, it's quite devastating. But at least, the very least, what we have a responsibility to do, even if we don't have a ready solution, is to name the problem, to name that we are missing this information. We're likely missing the leading cause of death because it's not convenient to talk about how people murder their pregnant wives or girlfriends. Nobody wants to talk about that, right? um, Especially in a world where now we're forcing pregnancy on somebody. What does that mean? When you force pregnancy on someone and then they are brutalized by their partner for said pregnancy.
Now, tell me this. What do the demographic breakdowns reveal?
Well, as you would imagine, Black women are disproportionately affected. About 12 per 100,000 versus 2 per 100,000 for white women, so a six-fold difference. 39% increase murder risk for Black women when pregnant. And Black teenagers are 7 times more likely. So all teenagers are 6.67. Black teenagers are slightly more likely to be murdered. Hispanic women, 4.5 per 100,000, more than double of white women's rate of being murdered by partners. So what this means, if you are a pregnant Black teenager in America, pregnancy increases your murder risk by 667%.
Wow. Where and how are these murders happening?
They're happening in people's homes. They're happening in our nation of guns, right? Where guns are plentiful, right? We know 65% of these deaths happen in homes where women should be the safest, right? And 70% of those deaths involve firearms. And so guns increase the risk of a woman dying by her partner's hand immensely. This is something that domestic violence advocates have been saying for years. is if we want to save women, we need to get guns out of the house because what happens? People get into heated debates, they grab their guns, and in the heat of the moment, next thing you know, you have your pregnant girlfriend on the floor, right? And so the things that escalate these patterns are, for people to kind of look out for this in their community because this is happening to people that's one thing I want to be clear. Maybe you don't know a pregnant woman that is going to die from at the hands of her partner, but you know plenty that are being abused. It's just a fact. And so the escalation patterns include around the first prenatal visit. Partners can become very aggressive. This is because the pregnancy becomes real. Around the 20-week anatomy scan, this is when sex is determined. It becomes more concrete. If you look at an anatomy scan, it looks like a baby, right? You can see the baby's face. You can see all of the limbs. It becomes concrete. The third trimester is one of the most dangerous times because birth is imminent. And then partners who are controlling, the thing that someone who is controlling hates is when things are changing rapidly, right? And in pregnancy, women's bodies change rapidly. Their attention is divided, right? Their interest in sex is different, or, maybe decreased, maybe don't want to have sex at all. Like every woman's different, right? They might have new support systems. Maybe their mother is coming to visit them or their sister is coming to visit them more. All of these, all of these elements really agitate abusers. And one of the reasons that we are doing this talk is we want people to pay attention to the pregnant women in their life, particularly the young pregnant women. Pay attention to the people around them. Pay attention to those subtle elements or subtle signs of control. Does she have access to a vehicle? Is she able to control her own schedule? Are you always, is she always waiting for her partner because she needs a ride somewhere? There are a lot of subtle things that I have seen as a provider that really make me concerned when I start hearing it. My young patients kind of express some of these control dynamics. And if you train your ear to hear it too, there's nothing special about, this is not particular medical knowledge, right? This is just understanding of society and how control and domestic violence works. And so everyone should be able to pick up on some of these cues because that's how we will save women.
Now, how does abortion policy connect to these murders?
This is when the data really becomes an indictment, particularly to, all of the folks who are, I I have such mixed feelings about the pro-life world. So I was raised Catholic. So I understand that debate very well. I actually don't perform elective abortions. I don't talk about it much because it's not you know, it's not really relevant. I understand the need. I Obviously, if there's an indication, that's a completely different story, in my opinion. I don't consider those abortions. I know people have like all sorts of, feelings around that, but from my discussions with my priest and from everything that I've read and from my own consciousness, I don't think there's anything that says in the Bible that this woman needs to die for a 12-week fetus that is going to end up in a demise because her water has broken, right? Like this is nonsensical. But the more I think about what it means to be pro-life, and the more I understand the reality of like on the ground of what these women are facing, I've actually come to the conclusion that it is completely it's in an unethical position to hold, especially in this infrastructure, in this climate, in this country, right? Because we know, we know that more babies, I just want to be very clear, more babies and more mothers are going to die if you have pro-life policies. You are not saving anyone's life. You are putting more people at risk. And that has to matter, right? If you are legitimately trying to save women, if you legitimately believe in the sanctity of life, then it has to matter that you're killing more people with these policies, right? Because you cannot just have blanket policies that are completely naive to the medical realities or the legal realities that people are living in, or the economic realities that they're living in, and actually expect to not be able to address any of those things and to have a positive outcome. I am just so tired of um, people using Christianity as an excuse to hurt people. Number one, I think it's in my opinion very blasphemous. It's a it is anything other than representing Christ. And I also think it is just unacceptable for you to want everyone else to face consequences and you refuse to face the consequences of your actions, right? You cannot demand that everyone else face consequences, then you need to face the consequence. You need to face the consequence that your policies are killing people. You have to face that. You have to be responsible for that. It's not this world where only other people are responsible for their actions. Only other people are bad and you're wholly good. It is absurd, and I am so sick and tired of that argument. I have heard people say that, women who have abortions should go to the electric chair. You are insane. I'm sorry. You are insane. I don't think I mean, there's nothing. I can go to sleep at very well tonight. I have nothing on my conscience. I feel like this is a completely defensible position. Everything that I have read, everything that I have prayed on, every person I have talked to who actually cares, and who actually is a thoughtful person has led me to this same conclusion. We do not have the infrastructure to have any sort of abortion restrictions in this country under the current laws that exist, under the current economic conditions that people exist in, under the current laws, the fact that we have so many guns out on the street. All of those things point us to giving women the only ethical thing is giving women reproductive choice. Otherwise, you are coercing people to sign their own death certificates, and that is not in Christ's name. I just don't agree. And so let's talk about what the data says. So states with restrictive abortion access have 75% higher pregnancy-associated homicide rates. So just so we're clear, when you have abortion restrictions, those women are more likely to get killed by their partner. Okay? So when you eliminate abortion access, this is not just a liberal talking point. Like, this is what they like to say, like, oh, these liberal women, oh, these college educated women, oh, they just don't like men, and they don't, all of these terrible things about us. These aren't talking points. These are women, because we know women who are being abused. It is not rare. 1 in 3 women, 1 in 4 women, depending on your demographic, is a victim of domestic violence. This is not rare at all. So we know women who've gone through this, right? We have friends who have gone through this, or we personally have gone through it ourselves. And so these aren't talking points. We know that when you eliminate abortion access, you trap women with violent partners, period. When you force disclosures, now you're telling a woman who might have an abusive partner. Now you're forcing her to tell him and then leaving her to face the consequences. Hey, that's not our problem, right? She might have other kids at home. She might be economically dependent on him. And you're just like, no, whatever. I don't care. That's not my problem. And then economic dependence. Women who depend on abusers financially, emotionally throughout the pregnancy, those women are at even greater risk. And you know what a lot of these lawmakers want to do? They want to increase our financial dependence, right? They want to make sure we don't have any education. They want to make sure that, women cannot live on their own without the support of a man, right? And I just want to be clear, when you say that, what you are telling people is, I do not care if your partner kills you. I rather have this fictionalized version of society than have you walking around alive. And you know what I have to say to that? No, I'm sorry. I don't agree. I'm not going to pretend to have this grief reaction to the death of your idol because I'm too busy grieving the women around me who are dying. I'm sorry. I just am. And so Texas, the great state of Texas, which has some of the most restrictive abortion laws, guess what? You could have predicted, has the highest pregnancy-associated homicide rates. So when you think you're protecting life, what you are doing, and I want you to be very clear when people have these arguments, I want you to have the arguments ready for them. When people say they just want to protect life, I want you to be very clear with them. When you have these policies in place, both women and their babies are more likely to die, and their babies. I want to also be clear. It's not like you're saving a whole bunch of babies. These babies, the death rate of infants has also increased. And you know what they're trying to do right now? They're very busy, sweeping all that data under the rug, disbanding the committees that collect that data, taking these epidemiologists who have worked their entire careers for very minimal pay and calling them like, terrorists because they have the audacity to collect data that would suggest that their worldview is not what they think. And what I always try to tell people, if you are right, then you want that data collected. I want that data collected so bad. I want them to count every single person. And if I turn out to be wrong, I will eat my words. Because you know why I want that data collected? I'm not hiding anything. We know we're not hiding anything, right? The people who are hiding things, they're the ones who benefit, right? We talked about it. Who benefits from living in these shadows? The abusers, the fraudsters, the criminals. And those people can look super religious. They can be sitting in the front pew at church and they can fit those criteria just as easily.
Now, what about healthcare system response?
Well, the medical system completely has failed at this. The response is almost non-existent. I mean, we don't learn this stuff. We get this stuff from our own research. Like we do, like it's not like I'm going to some professional society. I'm not going to ACOG's website. I'm not going to SMFM. No, we are the people collecting this research. We're reading papers. We are looking at, these journal articles in public health magazines. We're going to this information and we're finding it ourselves, right? So because the medical system isn't doing anything. I mean, I didn't even know about that homicide exceeded all of traditional maternal mortality causes by twofold. I did not know that. And I guarantee you, if I were to ask the average OBGYN if they knew that, they'd probably say no. The healthcare system just like a lot of traditional systems, healthcare is very, medicine's very traditional, likes to pretend that things like violence don't exist because it's very inconvenient. We don't train people to recognize this. I cannot tell you how many lectures I have sat in on preeclampsia, and I think that's great. I think it's fascinating. I'm a total nerd. I love that stuff, right? But do we need that much emphasis on preeclampsia and not one mention on how to really screen for the leading cause of death? We have elaborate protocols. We have these detailed guidelines for group B strep that affects such a tiny fraction of people. Every woman gets swabbed for group B strep. We put people on massive doses of penicillin to prevent such a small little number of infections while we just watch women's lives be snuffed away. And so what I wish to see and doesn't happen is, as OBGYN residents and faculty, we should be trained in this. We should know the homicide rates in our own states, but do we know that? No. And the states that have the highest rates, those are where the OBGYNs are leaving. Now you can't train residents properly on like the old stuff. Forget the new stuff. I mean, we can't even, a lot of residents aren't even learning how to do like DNEs. Like they don't know how to do that. They don't know how to evacuate a uterus. Like if you don't know that as an OBGYN, there's no other doctor who knows how to do that in the hospital. Let me tell you, there's nobody who knows how to do that. If you don't know how to do that, that woman will die, right? Because the inability to evacuate a uterus that's hemorrhaging or infected, that will kill a woman. And that's why women used to, we talk about all of this stuff being natural. Yeah, it's natural, but like, do you know how many women died in childbirth? Like, it was a very common occurrence. Like, people just died, you know? So, yeah, it's natural, but I hope you want your daughter to live past the age of 30. I want mine to, right? And so we need to really understand what does natural mean? Anyways, I have to like take a deep breath. I have to take a deep breath. Okay.
So, what should people understand about the scope?
So a couple numbers I want people to keep in their heads. It's been 10 days since Kirk's death. Statistically, about additional 4 pregnant women have been murdered in America. These are foreign women who will never hold their babies. And also, newsflash, if you kill a pregnant woman, you know what happens to that baby? The baby dies too, right? And so you have 2 lives that you haven't saved. For the people who are very obsessed about saving babies' lives, well, you have to save the mom too. You have children who grow up without a mother because a lot of times those women have other babies. You have devastated families. But where are the vigils? Where is the wall-to-wall coverage? Has anyone even heard of any of this information? Probably not. And so the broader context is for every woman who's killed, there is dozens living with violence threats. For all the women in my office next week, there are dozens more who are terrified to tell their partner that they're pregnant. There are women who don't even have access to the basic parts that will make you like an autonomous human. Do they have their ID card? A lot of partners take that. They take their license. They take the key to their car. They take the key to the house, right? And so she cannot attend appointments alone. Why? He doesn't want her to be talking to you without him understanding what she's saying, because that reduces. What if I fill her mind with propaganda like I'm doing right now? And, what if I give her information about, domestic violence shelters? We can't have that. We have women who are planning births, who are unsure Am I online? Hmm. Hold, please, everyone. I don't, Yanni, if you can hear us, can you let us know? Oh, shoot. Oh, no, my phone died too. Okay. That's no good. I'm on call. Well, I'm going to assume that I'm online. Um, yeah. Yeah, because my phone died. That's probably it. Um, 428. That's my name. Yanni, if you can hear us, if you can log me back into the good internet. All right, let's see. Let's see. Uh-oh. I have to call the hospital.
Your phone had it just.
It must have just, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're on. I think this is live. Okay, perfect. Sorry, everyone. We had some technical difficulties. I got kicked off the line, but I'm back. We're back. All right, where were we? Let's move to the next part because I forgot where we were, but I know we were talking about some very crucial information for women, and the next part I think is going to be just as important to get through. So, Dominique, do you want to start us off?
So I know, Dr. Connor, you said pregnancy homicides represent just part of the border violence patterns, but what's happening to Native women? Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
So, what's happening to Native women is a genocide, right? And I use that word precisely because it's the accurate term for systematic elimination of a population. And so let me share some staggering statistics. I was like flabbergasted when I learned about this. 84.3% of Native women experience serious violence in their lifetime. 84.3%, almost all of them. That's more than 4 in 5 women. In some tribes, there are murder rates 10 times the national average. So you know how like people who live in like these beautiful, safe suburban neighborhoods are obsessed with violence and like being killed by like some straight. These women are actually being killed by some random stranger walking down the street. Like this is their reality. The thing that people concoct in their mind, that's actually the reality for a lot of Native women. In 2016, there were almost 6,000 Native women or girls who were reported missing. Do you know how many of those actually ended up in a federal database, meaning like the FBI database? Only 116 cases. So there's almost 6,000 women who are missing, and only 116 are even in the database that will help find them. We're not talking about people who are found. We're talking about people who even have a chance of being found, that the police are like, hey, this person is missing. Let me do my job and try to like help this family. Only 116 in databases that allow for law enforcement to search for these women. If that doesn't like chill you to the bone, that should be frightening. I mean, can you imagine as a mom, with a young daughter, not only does the police not, I mean, we're not even talking about solving a crime. There's so little chance that her name would even be included in the database that would allow you to solve a crime. Like if you came up with some guy's DNA 10 years from now, like if that's her murderer, like he will get away scot-free, right? Because she's not even included in the database. I just can't. It's just something. It's just so. It's really sickening when you think about it. How we have just systematically decided that these women just don't matter.
How is this possible in 2025? That's what I don't understand. It's 2025. How is this possible?
The same way it's possible that the First Amendment is a,
Thing.
it's not even a thing anymore, right? Like, and anything's possible, I guess. I think it's the same thing. I think we all had were living under a premise that society operated in a way that it didn't operate, right? Um, it's only until recently that I realized that like so many people just don't care about women and children. I don't know, maybe I'm just so naive. I still thought that people cared about at least their women and children. Like, okay, fine, you might be racist. You don't care about like my family, but you care about your girls, your women, right? Like, right? Please, like tell me because otherwise it's really scary. Because I don't know how to connect with people who don't care about that at all. Like that's just completely irrelevant to them. What do you care about? That's the question I have. Because then we start getting into some really scary situations where these people have nothing that really ties them to humanity, right? Like if you don't care about your mom, if you don't care about your wife, you don't care about your daughter, like you don't see children as people that need to be protected and loved, then I don't know. I don't know how to connect with you. And so this is a case of systematic underreporting, systematic and deliberate underfunding, systematic exclusion, policy choices at every turn, the policy choice was to ignore these women. These women are 135% more likely to remain unidentified. Even when there's physical evidence, the system doesn't prioritize them. And the thing I really want you to really get in your mind is if there are 5,700 reported cases, how many unreported cases do you think there are? Because if you were a Native woman, right, would you report it? Like, why? Why? So you can tell me to my face that my daughter's like life doesn't matter. I mean, there's almost no chance you're gonna even put her in your, precious FBI database. So why would I report it? It probably will just make you a bigger victim. Now you have to interact with the criminal justice system and any sort of interact. And this is one thing that like white people don't understand at all. Any sort of interaction with the criminal justice system is dangerous if you are a person of color. It's just dangerous. It's dangerous. It's dangerous for them to get your number. It's dangerous for them to know where you're at, to have your address on their radar. It is dangerous. And it's dangerous in really unpredictable ways. And so, of course, what do people do? The only logical thing that they can do, they, as a community, they band together, they try to find these women, and when they can't, they grieve and mourn them. And that's really what we have. That's what it's been. That's what they're left with.
Now, what mechanisms are allowing this to continue?
So there are, and I don't, obviously I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the laws. There's a whole body of law that explains the relationship between native lands and the federal government. But the most simple way to look at it is it's a jurisdictional maze. where you have tribal, state, federal jurisdictions all involved. There are gaps where cases fall through. There's no clear authority or adequate resources. And that jurisdictional complexity, the goal of it is to undermine tribal sovereignty. And so they've created a system where they have from the start of this from when Europeans first landed on the shores, there's been a systematic attempt to undermine the sovereignty of Native people, and this is just an extension of that. And the even more tragic thing is, what about the rest of us? Like, when was the last time you saw the media talk about a Native woman on, when they're talking about national missing persons? I saw this on LinkedIn. I literally never even, it was not ever even on my radar. We talk about Gabby, I think her name is Gabby Petito. I don't know, I might be butchering her name. She was a national obsession. She was on cable news for months, social media and campaigns, Netflix series. And I'm not saying that because I, you know, don't think her family should, of course, like if that's your family member, you want to do everything that you can to get them found, right? Which includes involving the media. But the media and the rest of us have to understand that we cannot do that at the expense of thousands of missing Native women that have no coverage, no searches, no series, no one's on Netflix talking to them, none of that. And I think I don't know if I have this information here, but the thing that is the most kind of shocking about this whole epidemic is, I don't have the number readily available, but I want to say it's something like 95% of the murders are committed by non-native men. So what that means is men who don't live on, who who aren't a part of their tribe, are coming into their community with the explicit purpose of brutalizing and killing women. Because what better sociopath's dream than a legal quagmire that has women and girls who you can brutalize, and there's less than a 10% chance that anyone would even bother to look. not even hold you accountable, but bother to look. And so should we be surprised that like serial killers probably go and prey on Native American women? No, of course. This is the this is the out this is the only outcome of those sorts of policies.
Now, how does this connect to healthcare?
Again, this is just another reflection of how healthcare has completely abandoned their or our responsibility to see patients as a whole person. So first, there are significant funding disparities. There are about $4,000 annually dedicated to the healthcare of Native women. If you are a federal employee, that's about $10,000 per person. And then if you are a federal prisoner, the government spends about $13,000 per person for your healthcare. So 4,000, 10,000, 13,000. So number one, we don't invest in the healthcare of Native women. And so should we be surprised that they have some of the poorest health outcomes on par with Black women? No. I mean, again, if you have policies that are so intentionally unfair, the logical outcome is going to be an unfair outcome. And so we know that their highest, violence is highest in communities that are systematically under-resourced. These women are more likely to need emergency care, trauma treatment, mental health services, but less likely to have access to it. And when they do have access to it, are they even seeing a provider that has the cultural competence to take care of them adequately? I work in some hospitals in rural North Carolina, and I cared for, it was a very poor community. Um, the patients were either Native American or Black. Very high risk, very busy, very under-resourced. And as a provider, I had never cared for that many Native American women. I hadn't had that experience, right? I trained in Massachusetts. These populations are very siloed. They're only, they're like large concentrations in certain areas of the country, but in other areas, you may not encounter them. And it was eye-opening, to me. It was it was a learning experience. I I mean, a lot of, the things that I saw these women struggling with, a lot of the issues that we've talked about today, but also substance use disorder was a huge problem. But unlike other communities, nobody's sending resources their way to help. Women who lacked access to contraception. I remember this poor woman, I think she was had her seventh or eighth kid, and she was like, I cannot leave here without contraception. And where I trained in Massachusetts, we would be able to put like IUDs right after the placenta was removed. We would, after both a vaginal or a C-section, we'd put in an IUD, especially in a patient population like this, who they might not be able to come back. I can't tell you how many women like either came to see us, like their first time seeing us was when they were delivering their baby, or they came after the baby was already born, um, to remove their placenta, right? Like they're not interacting, significantly with the medical health system. And so, you know, I found it to be a really enriching experience, but not something at all that I was trained to do. Not something we talked about, not something I was educated on. Again, all of this learning was, self-taught and from experience, and that really shouldn't be the case. Of course, you can't learn everything in school, but your education should prepare you um, to take care of all types of people. And right now, our medical education system just doesn't.
I want to touch on the law enforcement failure. Can you tell me about law enforcement? What about law enforcement?
So inadequate, catastrophically inadequate. Um, the FBI, I mean, I don't even know what's going on now because the FBI, I mean, this is the old FBI when the FBI used to, be competent. Who knows what's happening now? They were understaffed, and didn't prioritize Native women cases. Again, no cultural competence. There weren't a lot of agents who were Native or understood Native populations. They had no pre-existing tribal relationships. Often the women were dismissed as runaways. Um, Domestic violence was dismissed as cultural issues. Sexual assault was ignored. A missing person would be misclassified. And this is not, you know, just like liberal speak. I'll tell you a story. The same hospital system, we had a partner. His girlfriend was in labor. He was very scary. He was obviously very dangerous. She was obviously an abuse victim. To make a long story short, we had to get him out of the hospital. We called the police. We called our security team, and finally we got him out of the hospital. When the police were talking to her and then subsequently talking to me as the attending physician on the floor, you would have thought I was a criminal. They treated me like dirt. They treated all the women on that unit, the nurses, me as a physician, the patient, like garbage. And I remember before when we were talking to the patient about like what we had to do, that we need to call the police because her partner was unstable. He like went outside to, I don't know, smoke a cigarette, and we used that opportunity to talk to her. Um, and she was terrified. She's like, I don't want you to call the police because if you call the police, he's friends with all the police and they're not going to listen to me, et cetera, et cetera. We finally, we told her like we have no other option. Like there are other patients here. We are just like a unit of women and children and newborns, right? Um, we cannot, we have to try to, we can't allow, someone who's unsafe to be here. And when they talked to me, I understood exactly what she was saying. I was like, yeah, you're right. These women, men were not going to help. We all got that message. We're like, if this man comes back and tries to hurt her and by, proximity hurts one of us, they were not going to help us. It was 100% clear. They thought she was a liar. And by extension, we were liars and not deserving of their help. And so when I think about the police in these communities, that's what I think about because that's been my direct experience, right? I don't need to read um, some liberal blog. I have direct experience that tells me like when we needed help, they weren't there to help us. They saw us as the enemy. And that's a really scary world to live in as a woman.
I want to touch back on that value message. How does this connect to Charlie Kirk's response?
I think it's just clear what society prioritizes. Um, we've had 10 days of wall-to-wall coverage on his murder, um, whereas decades of Native women being systematically killed is met with silence, no investigations, no media coverage, no resource mobilization. And, the only logical thing you can conclude for that is that some lives matter and others don't. And I'm not saying that because I'm trying to convince someone, like, whatever. If you don't, if you cannot see this by just like having eyeballs in your head and having a brain that functions, if you can't, if that doesn't, if you can't see these numbers and understand that society is structured in such an unfair way, against certain populations, then I don't know what to tell you because the writing is right there on the wall. Violence is taken seriously if it's against certain people. Violence against other people who are not deserving of justice, who lives society hasn't deemed as valuable, can be ignored. And so when we talk about supremacy that's being communicated when people are demanding appropriate grief for Charlie Kirk while maintaining silence about the slaughter of Native women or the crisis of homicides against pregnant women, that's what we're talking about, right? The fact that you don't even see that other side. And more importantly, if we mention the other side, somehow we're like bad people because we say, hey, what about these other people? And I just reject that premise completely. I have come to the conclusion that I just don't feel like it's necessary to have to justify my existence or the existence of other women. If other people have a problem with that, then they're entitled to their opinion. But this concept of like debating my humanity or debating the humanity of other women, I'm not doing that. I'm sorry. I don't consider that debate. I don't consider that intellectual discussion. Um, I consider that, honestly, a waste of my time, right? Because if you cannot, you know, contrary to their opinion, Black women do have some brains up here. And if you cannot understand that, you're not my intellectual equal. And why would I waste my time having a discussion with somebody who doesn't understand like basic statistics and basic numbers? And that's kind of how I feel about it. And so it's a shame that this is the world that we live in now, but I think the way I kind of deal with it is just by focusing on what I can do and the women that I can support, and trying to spread these messages as far and wide as I can, um, so that we can, hopefully there's one person listening in the audience who has, who knows a pregnant teenager who might be in danger, and they might just have their little spidey senses up next time they go and visit her. And that could be the thing that makes the difference between whether she lives or whether she dies. So I know we've gone for a long time. We still have more to discuss, but I think probably we can have a part two. Uh, Next time we'll talk about um, the healthcare system collapse and its tie to democracy. To make a long story short, the birth world, the birth infrastructure in this country is falling apart. We are severely understaffed. And I think people don't realize it. And I don't think they're going to realize it until they go to the hospital and they expect a doctor to be there to deliver their baby, or if they need a C-section, and they're going to find out there's no doctor there. Um, we'll be talking about the recent Supreme Court case that essentially made Latinos in LA second-class citizens, and really understanding what that means for women and children. And then we will talk a little bit about the economy, which is not something we um, get into a ton, but seeing how our economy is being like, you know, destroyed, all the like fundamental building blocks, the innovation, the science, the things that really powered our economy are being systematically dismantled in a way that you might not see the effects today, but your children are going to see those effects in 10 years. Um, that is going to have an impact on women's health, right? And so if it has an impact on women's health, we want to be here to talk about it. So thank you everyone for coming today. Thank you, Dominique, for co-hosting with me. It is almost 1 a.m. here. And so she was a real trooper. As when you're an OB/GYN, you take call, I like time of the day doesn't really even have a meaning anymore to me. Like it's 1 a.m., but I feel fine, right? Your brain just like learns to I'm sure I'm like losing years of my life, so I do not recommend it. But your brain just like learns to function on very little sleep. But I know not everyone feels that way, so thank you very much, Dominique. You're probably like, when is Yamicia gonna shut up? Like it is 1 o'clock in the morning. And so we covered a lot of information today. Thank you, everyone. So just to remind you, this is from the Labora Collective. We are here to make sure that the medicine and all the things around you that affects your health, that it is discussed and it is talked about. Thank you to everyone who supported us. You know, any sort of support you can show us is appreciated. Um, so whether that means a free subscription, a like, or a share, all of that is valuable. You see me here today and Dominique, but we have a whole team behind us of people who are underpaid, overworked, very dedicated, and you know, we all appreciate when you take time out of your day to help us care for the women around us, help spread our message, help fund our work. And so thank you again, and I hope everyone has a good night.